today we are doing a game which I love, I find very wonderful. A lot of the other people on my show and off my show, honestly, and just here on Griffin Radio, most of them haven't played the game.
I am one of them. I've heard it. I've seen gameplay of it. I am one of those guys that, watches other gameplay videos of other people playing it when I can't play the game myself.
Twitch, YouTube, all that sort of stuff.
So I've seen it. I know the story and what happens, but I've never personally played it before. But I do know that the music is great.
Yeah. I have...
Very, very fan service. Like, the fans love the music.
Yeah. Most of my experience with it actually is similar. Yes. Twitch, YouTube, that sort of thing. Yep. I have some experience with actually hands-on playing the game. But as much as I love it, as much as I love the story, as much as I love the music, some of the gameplay isn't exactly my thing. Because it has this combat... Well, let's clarify. We're going over the game Undertale today. Right? With Deltarune now out for a while now, actually, and I thought about doing it last semester, but we were nearing the end of the semester.
Yeah.
I already had shows planned, so I didn't get a chance. So this one is a role-playing game, and it was released in 2015, I believe. September 2015, and that was for Microsoft and OS X, Linux, July 2016, and then PlayStation 4 and Vita in August 2017, and then Switch, September of 2018.
Switch has everything that's already come out, though.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a consistent theme for the Nintendo Switch already, is if it's already been a game that's made, we probably have it.
Yeah. So this is a very beautiful, interesting game. The whole thing is created by an indie developer called Toby Fox. Pretty much everything in the game. He had some help with some other artists and like computer graphics, art type stuff, and that's about it. He did almost everything in the game, including the music, as far as I understand himself.
Wow. We're in a pretty great era. The indie era is a pretty unique and nice era of video games, because you've got Undertale, which is an indie game by an indie developer who's just the guy. You've got indie games like, I'm forgetting the name, but there are indie games out there where it's a group of friends that have an idea and they get together and couple friends make the music, couple friends make the, the coding of it. And then you've got, like projects that are getting Kickstarter funds and stuff, and slightly weird. Basically, like the indie platform is allowing it to be more not just as a game for entertainment, but more as an art form too. Because with indie, like the art form of it, like the 8-bit music that you won't get in studio made, like big name company games, like big name companies more often than not are not going to make 8-bit sounds or music.
No, big like AAA industry level games. Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't understand, in this case, AAA is like when you hear about AAA movies, these are movies with huge millions of dollars budget. So any game that is like
Ubisoft, Activision.
One of the huge companies
BioWare.
that can throw millions of dollars at a game, that's a AAA game. So these AAA games almost always go with orchestras, things like that playing.
They want big themes. They want to impress with graphics and music of high quality. But a game that I was thinking of, like Rivals of Aether, is a big little fighting game that they made their own music for. But when you want that nostalgic feeling of like good quality 8-bit music, you're not going to get it from a AAA title. More often than not, I won't name any names because I don't know every game that every AAA title has put out. But more often than not, you're not going to get classic 8-bit graphics and quality from a AAA title. That's really more of an indie developer thing and an indie game thing.
It's just so much easier to do things like that, especially when you're working all on your own. Like Toby Fox was, or with a very small studio, like some of these indie developers are. So you're not going to get the very powerful graphics engine and get access to like, I'm going to make this on Unreal 4 and I'm going to make this the most beautiful, amazing thing I possibly can. No, you're going to use what you can use and you're going to get what you can get out of it. And if you have the talent to do so, like a lot of these people can, you can make some really interesting games and some very beautiful music from someone who I don't know how much of a musical background Toby Fox even has.
Thank God for the internet, man. Thank God that the internet allows like Kickstarters and GoFundMes and stuff like that, because it's allowing a lot of creators that are doing these kinds of things to actually get their stories out, because like you said, they don't really have the tools even with their Kickstarter funds and their GoFundMes, so they're just using like 8-bit sounds and little 8-bit graphics to make, to just get their story told. They don't really care how it looks they want it to look as good as possible, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's not about what it looks like or what it sounds like. It's about the story that they want to tell.
Or in some cases, the story they need to tell.
Exactly.
From what I understand, Toby Fox has said multiple times that he had to make Undertale.
Yeah.
He had to. He couldn't not make Undertale. And now these days, like with Deltarune coming out, he spent so much time wondering about how am I supposed to follow up Undertale? How am I possibly supposed to make a sequel to that? How am I supposed to give people that feeling again? Until he finally came out on even like social network like Twitter and places like that saying, admitting, I don't think I can ever give you guys that feeling of the first time you played Undertale ever again, but I think I can do something else, right? So he finally he releases Deltarune, which is an idea that he's from what I understand, been working on even longer since before Undertale ever came out.
Amazing.
And is another thing that he needs to get this out.
What an amazing guy, man. What an amazing person. Like, do you know how incredible you have to be to make something like Undertale, which in its simplicity, but its unique turns on its simplistic theme makes it so good? But like, to have a game before that, to have an idea before that, it's like, it's just crazy. It's like Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter, she had the idea of, J.K. Rowling had the idea of the ending of Harry Potter before all of the middle stuff came out. Yeah. She knew that they wanted to go that way. So it's like the way these creative minds, these creative people work with, I've got this amazing story about a child that falls down a hole and, visits monsters, and some of them are nice and some of them are mean. But like, I also have this story in my head that's equally as riveting and emotional. And it's like, God, man, can you give me a second to breathe? Like, I'm still like 4 years later trying to get over Undertale.
Yeah. So like B-Millie was saying, the story is pretty simplistic but pretty interesting and sort of fantastical. Little kid falls down a hole. Turns out there's some ancient war between like humans and monsters, and now all the monsters live here in the underground, and you have to move through this environment. And even though they constantly refer to them as the monsters, it's a game in which you can go through and you can fight normal fights along the way if you want. You can go through and you can like wipe out all the monsters in your way, which they call a genocide run, which is pretty messed up. Or you can go through in a way that the game kind of pushes you to go but never forces you to, which is a pacifist run where you don't have to kill anyone.
I think that's what makes the game incredible, is that you have that option to destroy everything in your path. You have the option to, kill enemies only as you see fit.
Yeah.
Or you have the option to, I'm not going to do anything to anybody. And from my understanding, each of those routes has a different ending.
Yeah.
There are 3 different endings, correct?
Yeah, there's a genocide, there's a neutral, and then there's a pacifist.
Yes.
And it changes, and there are variations on them, of course, depending on who you fought, who you didn't, who you, especially like the neutral ending will have a lot of variations depending on who you actually fought and who you didn't. And so they're constantly referring to all these things as monsters, and they're very sort of inhuman. They're like creatures and things like that, but you can talk to them and interact with them and even become friends with them if you decide to go on pacifist run and stuff of that sort. So let's go ahead and move into our first chunk of music.
Yeah.
For the day. So what I have for you guys... Sec.
But like we talked about before, like the music, the fact that they can make that kind of stuff without a musical background, the 8-bitness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love synths and 8-bit sounds so much, like those soundtracks, like, so much, that it is so impressive to me that they can make a whole soundtrack theme. Anybody that's musically talented is very impressive to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff on here because it's not all just MIDI and 8-bit.
Yeah.
And you get Toby Fox, there's parts here where it sounds like they're playing guitar and things of that sort as well. So, like I said, I don't know how much of a musical background he has, but he was doing pretty much the whole game by himself, so he did all of this stuff.
Yeah. If you're musically talented, if I make billions of dollars one day, I'm still going to be envious of you. They're just so incredible. So...
Okay, so we have Once Upon a Time, and this is sort of the starter song for the game. And then we have Ruins, which is the first environment that you walk through, that you adventure through. And then we have Home, which is the first sort of safe haven you get to after that first place, in which you're with someone who's trying to take care of you and keep you safe and all that sort of stuff. And then we have Heartache, which is unfortunately having a disagreement, a pretty serious disagreement with that person who's trying to help you and keep you safe. And this enters into our first place of what kind of run are you going for? Are you going to really try and fight this person? Or are you going to try and reason with them? Are you going to try and get away without fighting them at all? All that sort of stuff. So this is pretty much the first block of the game, the first chunk of the game that I've got for you guys. And then we will be back right after that is finished. Welcome back.
So fun. So fun.
Yep.
What a fun soundtrack.
There was some of that nice synthy stuff in there that you love so much.
It's so good. Bello.
But as I was saying to you during the break, I did actually have a little bit of information about his musical background and inspirations, that sort of thing. So he was originally trying to use a music tracker to compose the soundtrack, which would have helped give it a lot more of that synthy sort of. Yeah. He was finding it really difficult to use that, though. So what he ends up doing is he would play segments of the music separately.
Oh.
And then he actually connects them together on a track.
Oh, huh.
So he is actually a self-taught musician.
Oh, there you go.
So he does have some musical background.
See?
Just not properly trained or anything of that sort. And so he composed all the music in the game on his own. And most of the tracks with like very little iteration at all. So the main theme of the game, which in itself is called Undertale, the theme, and I do have that one for them to listen to today. It's kind of the only song on the entire soundtrack that had a bunch of different iterations along the way as he changed it and worked on it more. And it's like the first song he finished too. So he finished it early and then he kept changing it as he went along making the game. And also his inspiration, it's all Super Nintendo role-playing games, that sort of stuff, so like good. Earthbound, which brings up another interesting part, which is it's not the first, I guess you could say, game that Toby Fox made, because when people looked back on it, they found that the first thing he really did was what was called like a ROM hack.
Okay.
For Earthbound on the Super Nintendo.
Oh, cool.
A ROM hack, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically someone takes a game that exists and then they make their own story, their own gameplay, all their own stuff, kind of out of the same engine based off the game or a different engine, whatever. Yeah. But it's like, here's the game you know, now here's my story within it, or here's my take on it, that sort of thing. Right? So he did an entire ROM hack for Earthbound, which was, from what I understand, really well made, but also quite a bit like darker storyline, stuff like that.
Sounds like him.
Because for anyone who doesn't know, the last segment of Earthbound has things like time travel and putting your soul in a robot body and all this weird sort of 90s fantasy Japanese RPG stuff. And of course, it all ends, happily ever.
Yeah, flowers and rainbows and everything's.
So he did like a different, darker, weirder take on the whole thing.
Yep.
Apparently, in his ROM hack, and that is part of what carries over a lot into Undertale. Is it's kind of weird and kind of interesting and kind of lighthearted at points in the fact that you can befriend all these monsters and things. But so much of the world and what's going on in the world is kind of really dark and strange and twisted.
It's definitely a darker theme, and you can tell that going in immediately. I mean, like you said, you can take a nicer path, and things can be nicer, but there's definitely like a vibe of just like things are wrong. Something's wrong,
So if you end up going through genocide wise, you're like, I'm gonna kill everyone, fight everyone, kill everyone, all that, right? Then you end up getting into whole stories about like split personalities and psychoses and that sort of thing. But even if you go through pacifists, you're not killing anyone, and you're trying to talk and interact with people to end fights, because you still have to get in fights even if you go on a pacifist run.
Yeah, you gotta.
But you end them differently. You talk to people, you interact with them, you do different things to like end the fight without actually fighting. And even if you go through that way, there are whole sections of the game in its story where you're dealing with like underground laboratories and weird soul experiments and like humans have been killed and they're stealing souls, and here's these people who've like shattered their own existence and spread it across multiple realities and all this weird stuff.
It is dark.
Yeah, it's just really strange, the game, but it's amazing.
Oh, it's so good
on every level. Just it's so beautiful and such an interesting story, even how dark it is, and such interesting characters, and really a lot of very interesting gameplay as well. Like I was saying during our first section, I didn't take to the battle system in this game because it's what's known as bullet hell. And Kind of. It's bullet hell-like, which a bullet hell, again, for anyone who doesn't understand, is like you're flying a plane almost across the screen, and then there's a bunch of enemies shooting a bunch of bullets at you all over the screen, and you're trying to bob and weave in between them, that sort of thing. That's what bullet hell is the, like, 99% of the screen is covered in bullets, and you're finding the one little path around them, that sort of stuff. And that's just not a type of gameplay that appealed to me very much. So as the battle mechanic of this game, that was harder for me to get into.
Yeah.
So in this game, they end up adding even more features on top of that, where normally you like float in the center and then enemies are throwing different attacks at you and you're dodging them, that sort of thing. And then they throw in things like an enemy can cause gravity, where you get dropped to the bottom and you have to like jump over attacks that they're doing, or you're getting slammed around to the sides and roof and all over the place, and you're just dodging all these attacks, and it can get really crazy. Especially when you're going through with like genocide runs where you actually have to fight more.
Yeah.
You end up fighting a lot of the bosses that you didn't have to face in a normal run, because they're like, you've been killing everyone. Now we're going to kill you instead.
It's time.
Yeah. So now we're going to fight back against you. And some of the most dangerous bosses in the entire game only really show up in that kind of run. And they have some of the just craziest attack patterns of any boss in the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually will lead us into our second block pretty well.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
For those of you that are just listening and not watching, which you can do on YouTube with most of these episodes.
Yeah, I'm still working on the cut down process. And I've done plenty of like Adobe Premiere and stuff like that in the past, but it's been a while, and so I need to speed up my process. But ultimately, I am starting to use video, and I am starting to cut the audio and the video together to upload to YouTube later. I haven't gotten quite there yet.
Yeah.
I have our first season, but that's audio only.
Yeah. But anyway, DJ Keen took a pause second, looked up at the clock, looked back, got his facts together, and he's like, wow, I'm really good at this. And he like is ready to get into his next segment. And
also the talk about the bosses that we're facing goes right into the next section.
Yeah.
Because the second block of music I have for us is boss music.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of interesting characters, and there's a bunch of interesting bosses throughout this game. And there's a bunch of really amazing music for each of these bosses.
Yeah.
And luckily, most of it, a lot of the chunks that I have here for Undertale tend to be a bit longer, 4 or 5, whatever songs long. Because a lot of the songs are 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? For the boss section, I actually did end up with about 10 minutes of music by taking, I think, all of the boss tracks. I don't know if I missed any, but I think this is all of them.
Cool.
But it's like 7 or 8 songs.
Oh, wow.
And it's still only about 10 minutes long.
Huh.
But that is what we're going into now, our second block. This is going to be boss themes. So the song that we ended our first block on, that was a boss fight. And the song that we'll start our third on is a boss fight as well. But these are really the like first really important boss fight and one of the last really important boss fights that are really part of that storyline.
Yeah.
This here is sort of all the bosses you could encounter along the way that you might need to fight against. So we will get into that, and then we will be right back.
See you then.
Okay. That was interesting.
Anyway, hello.
Sorry, we just had our live line ring at us once and then stop
and
immediately.
Then immediately stop ringing.
I would have been up for answering it and seeing what was on the other end, but I guess they didn't want to talk to us.
Change their mind. Megalovania does that to people.
Oh yeah, it drives people insane. like I was saying to you during the break, that's become pretty much a meme of the Undertale community. It's just like, just play Megalovania. Which, that was the last song on our list. I remembered partway through our break. I didn't actually go over what the songs were. They're all boss themes, but I didn't go over the list of the songs themselves. Yeah. So that last one, like you were saying, is called Megalovania. That's one of the songs that I believe you can only see on a Genocide playthrough, because I don't think you face that boss unless you're doing a Genocide playthrough. And the one before that was Battle Against a True Hero, which, again, I think that's only on a Genocide playthrough. I'm not certain about that one, though. But aside from those two, I'll go from top to bottom. So that was Bone Trestle, which is Papyrus, which it's interesting because, like I said, there's all these monsters and you can face bosses, but you can also befriend a lot of these people. So we have a lot of these people by name because you interact with them a lot. If you don't end up fighting them and killing them, then you're interacting with them. And
they're not just Skeleton Man or...
Yeah. And then Spear of Justice, which is Undyne. And then Metal Crusher, which is Metaton. And that's the first time you encounter it. Followed by Spider Dance, which is Muffet, Miss Muffet, which is very fitting. And then Death by Glamour, which is eventually you come across Metaton again. I think this one they call it Metaton EX, something like that. And it's like looks human now. Much. So Death by Glamour is a very flashy person.
Yes, love it. Very flamboyant.
Showboat kind of thing.
Yep, very flamboyant.
Yeah, and yeah, that's all those ones. So yeah, I ended up with like 7 songs, but they tend to be pretty short, except those Genocide ones. Those are like 3 minutes long each, which is quite a bit longer than most of the songs in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
So, oh yeah, the last parts that I had left was just how many awards this game got.
Please list them off, my friend.
It's over 1 million copies sold, nominated for multiple accolades and awards, including Game of the Year from several different gaming publications and conventions. So a bunch of people were giving this Game of the Year. It's like, oh, this is amazing. This had a ton of just hype and fan base just built up all around it after it was released, because there was nothing before release. There was almost nothing coming out for this game beforehand, because I imagine Toby Fox probably didn't expect a lot from this game.
Yeah.
He's just like, here's my thing. I had to make it. What do you guys think of it?
It goes to show you, man.
Millions of people were just like, this is incredible.
Millions. And that's the thing is, like, if you have a unique story that you want to put out there, you can do it. Mm-hmm. Like, don't think... this isn't like a motivational, like, oh, don't like doubt yourself. It's like, don't think that the money doesn't exist. Don't think that the time doesn't exist. Yeah. Like, somewhere out there, somebody wants to play it. Somebody. Oh, yeah. As long as it's unique enough. I mean, don't be the 86th person that wants to make an anime sword fighter that just like, you're the ruler of the world and you just like kill everybody and behead them. Like, that's not unique. I'm sorry to be the one to burst your bubble, but... guys, your anime sword fighter video game is not a unique storyline. No matter what dying father or betrayal you think is going to make it different. Yeah. But a story like Undertale, that kind of a story where it's like a legitimate,
this weird choices, little thing that was like eating away at your brain and you just had to get it out.
Choices, or you know what another like unique artistry indie game is. That sounds, the title, personally, again, the views, comments, and opinions of this podcast are personal, but to me personally, I hate the title, but the game I've heard is like really, really incredible, and I've watched playthroughs of it, is that literature club, the Doki Doki Literature Club, and it turns into like...
definitely not up my alley, but it does sound like it's incredible.
Yeah, at one point, it's So, major spoiler alert for those of you that have not played it. Please close your ears, stop listening, or do what you need to do for the next couple minutes.
Yeah.
But it's like this dating sim,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's basically like a dating sim where you're the guy and you join the literature club. And then at the end, it's like super self-aware of the fact that you're like playing the game and it starts to like break itself and like fix
characters are like dying and then the game starts glitching out and then you realize someone in the game realizes they're in a game and learns how to control the game.
It like starts messing with the coding of it. And then again, major spoiler, at the end you have to like go and delete a character file from the BIOS to like win the game or basically like to end it all. And then in the end, like the character you saved does the same crazy thing, so you just stop. It's just like it's so creative and it takes a genre and it just flips it.
This visual novel dating sim that turns into this weird glitched out fourth wall breaking horror story.
Take my expectations and flip them completely 180 and you have great storytelling.
Yeah.
It's very, and I mean, it's the same goes for Undertale, you know?
Yeah.
The same goes for Undertale.
It's kind of this cute, goofy little, you know, really kind of bad graphics, little characters walking along the screen, and it's just so deep, so dark, so interesting and weird.
And the themes are so real. And that's another thing is, with the kind of graphics and sounds that this game had, it brings you back to an era of like, you know, the 70s or 80s 8-bit games, you know? But 70s or 80s 8-bit games did not have this intense storytelling because they couldn't provide it. It was a very niche genre back then. So it was like, okay, we're just going to have Mario like jump on some bad guys, save a princess, everybody's happy, we go home. Now we have these 8-bit games with these 8-bit sounds where it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a genocide run, there's a neutral run, there's a pacifist run where like we build a bond with these people that I could have murdered. And it's just such a genre flip. So if you have a unique idea like that, like Undertale, don't let the money stop you, because I'm promising you somebody out there wants to hear it and play it, as long as it's a unique enough idea and unique enough in its execution. I think that's what pretty much, video gaming aside, pretty much everything in the world, the reason that people want to do things is because there's a unique take on it. Undertale's a unique take because it's an 8-bit game with 8-bit sounds, but a real, visceral story. Yeah. I honestly think that if this game had intense graphics and an intense orchestral sound, it wouldn't be as good. I personally think that anyway. I think that the vibe of it, the simplicity of the vibe of it,
it would definitely lose that.
I think it would lose something, in my opinion.
Childlike it seems to start out.
In my opinion, that's
it would definitely have lost
what I think. Yeah. So that's all I'm saying is, don't be like, oh my god, like this guy believes in me, I'm gonna go make the best game in the world. Like, you don't have to make an idea just because I said you do, but don't be discouraged if you have one. Like, he obviously didn't think that people would buy millions and millions of copies of this story that he had in his head for
I don't remember there being a whole lot of marketing or PR or anything around this game leading up to the release. So it was only after that it became extremely famous.
Amen.
Plus, I remember probably one of the last sections I have to talk about. I'll probably talk about Deltarune a little more before we go to our outro.
Mm-hmm.
But for one of the last sections I have here, I was mentioning to you during the break that this game has certain random elements to it.
Yeah.
We've talked about roguelikes before, where there's random generation, but that's generation of like the dungeon or the layout of this or where items are, that sort of thing. This one has this odd dice roll random generation thing going on, but with story elements. So when you hit new game, it'll effectively like digitally roll a pair of dice, and there's something like 100 outcomes. I don't remember exactly how many. And based on what you get, that determines what is and what is not in the game. And that can include whole sections, whole characters, whole storylines. And I mentioned to you that there's like 4 characters in this colored game. There's these 4 like gray or black and white like characters. that do exist in the game and have very important information about something that's not directly related to the game story itself, but very interesting side stuff.
Yes.
That you don't really get the chance to explore much unless you talk to them. But each one of them, from what I understand, only falls on a single number of the dice roll.
That's so crazy.
And they do so individually. So if you do a playthrough where you get lucky enough to get a dice roll where you can talk to one of them, you don't get to talk to the other 3. You have to play the game again, right? The whole idea not being, hey, play my game hundreds of times, that doesn't feel like what Toby Fox was trying to do. The whole idea being this game isn't going to be the same at all every time you play it. Things are going to change every time you play through this game.
And if you see another friend that's played it, you're going to have a different experience.
Yeah. They're going, and again, you still have to go out and find this stuff too, right? So these 4 characters exist out in the world in different places, and you can talk to them and get interesting information. But if you don't bother to go and talk to them, then you never did. And just having that level of randomness in a game, again, made by one person, and having it not be some cheap effect of trying to get players to play the game many times, but actually be about variation and trying to make it so the game is interesting and different every time someone goes to play it.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. All right. Yep. A little over that time, but
love it.
I'm just trying not to
it's going perfect.
10 hours I usually do. So we'll move into our third chunk of music. This is kind of our final chunk in the game before our outro. And that's pretty much where all this music comes from. So we start with Asgore, which is one of the final bosses in the game. It's not the final boss, so I'm not spoiling that if anyone still hasn't played Undertale. And then we move into Don't Give Up and Finale, both of which kind of do play during the final boss, but aren't its main theme. As I was telling B. Millie again during the break, the final boss is really interesting, but given how twisted and weird it is, the song had to be very twisted and weird to fit it, which works perfectly in the game, but out of context for people who don't play.
Kind of odd.
Yeah, it's a little odd. So I chose these 2 songs, which I think work much better out of context, and both are kind of played during the final boss, kind of when your character's coming to a realization, and then another section when you're really fighting against the boss.
Yep.
And then we move into Hopes and Dreams, which is like after you finish the game, you still get a chance to walk around and talk to everyone that you've met along the way, if any of them are still alive, and talk to your friends and all this before actually going to the final part of the game's storyline. And that's what'll play during this section.
Yep.
So we will be right back after this.
See you later. Hello.
Yeah. So had one more little part to talk about before we get to our outro, and that is Deltarune,
yes,
which some people may already realize is an anagram of Undertale.
We have referenced it a couple times.
Yeah, so it wasn't too long ago. It was late last year, or even early this year, maybe. Toby Fox was on Twitter and other social media, that sort of thing, talking about I'll never be able to make a sequel to Undertale and Undertale 2.
Yep.
I won't be able to make a game that really makes people have that kind of experience the first time they play it through again. But he was saying, if you'll allow me, I think I can make something else.
Yeah.
And so it turned out there was this whole big like build up to it where originally it was released as like the survey or something, and supposedly not by Toby Fox or anything like that. And it's like, there's this little survey, blah, 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 whatever. And it ended up being the first chapter of a whole new game.
What?
Yeah, Toby Fox likes to mess with people like that. So this ended up being what's called the first chapter of this new game, Deltarune, which, as he said before, it's not a sequel to Undertale, and it's not exactly the world of Undertale. And a lot of people have speculated about that, because there's a lot of the same characters, but you're not in the underground, you're on the surface, they have different jobs, different lives, kind of a different storyline. Yeah. And this game is interesting, gameplay, all that stuff. It introduces like a party system, so you have other people traveling with you. It introduces just kind of some better graphics and user interface stuff, that sort of thing. It's almost like an 8-bit to 16-bit kind of step.
Okay. Yeah.
Almost. Not quite. It's more like the mechanics sort of step up a generation or whatever, that sort of thing. But then it also introduces some other things, which is we constantly talk about how much your decisions matter in Undertale.
Yep.
Right? A neutral playthrough, a genocide playthrough where you kill everything, a pacifist playthrough where you don't want to fight anyone, all that sort of stuff. And all of it changes the game, changes the story, the characters, the world, all of that. And it established that Deltarune isn't really your tale, right? Whether you fight or run or interact, or you can still do all that kind of stuff in battle, but it's not really going to change the storyline at all. Like, this is going to tell one story, the story that Toby Fox wants to tell. Yeah. And that's the story he's going to tell, right? So as he's established, this isn't Undertale, this isn't the same world, this isn't the same story, but there's of course, there's a ton of people doing all sorts of theories about how it's connected. Is this another universe in which, like, the war between humans and monsters never happened? Or is this,
you're obviously going to get that.
All kinds of theories going on about exactly how connected it is, because it is, like, the exact same characters, but living different lives. So that one is out now and definitely can be played by pretty much everyone. I believe it just recently came to Switch, but I know it's in a lot of other places as well. I think just this last week or something it ended up on Switch finally. And it's interesting. It's really interesting. It's some very changed mechanics, some very interesting story elements. That, again, you can spend a lot of time wondering how exactly does this connect to Undertale? Does it? Is it? All that sort of stuff. But even on its own is just a very fun game. And so I definitely invite anyone who is interested to definitely play Undertale, but also to pick up Deltarune. Yeah. And I think that's it, unless you had anything left.
Nothing, just I think this is a good example as any. Just support your indie creators because they make great content, man. Yeah.
I find you have to go to indie studios a lot these days for really creative, really interesting stuff. The AAA industry is just, well, I'll let Simon cover that on
for
his
another
show.
day.
I'll let Simon cover that stuff on his show if he wants to. Just the AAA industry is not where you go for super creative or interesting or new or experimental these days. But we will be heading out for the day. I am going to leave you guys with the titular song of the game, Undertale. And I just really like this song. It's a song that sort of plays at the very end of the game.
Yeah.
It's got this really interesting beat where it's almost kind of like reaching for something that isn't quite there for a while, where you sort of expect the song to go like one way,
but it doesn't really.
In the way it's playing, and doesn't quite go there for a while.
That's
and
cool.
Then finally gives you what you want as it gets further on. It's just really interesting how that song works. So this has been Critical Hits. I am DJ Keen, and today I've been joined by
DJ B. Millie, that's me.
Yep, and we were covering Undertale, and now we are leaving you with the song Undertale.
Thank you, guys.
We will see you probably next week, unless anything comes up. We'll probably see you guys next week. 1:30 p.m. Tuesday next week.
That's us.
See you guys.